He'll make the, and he can control the music as well. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Battery last. Okay.
הדלקת את זה? הדלקת?
Good evening, everyone. It is so good to see so many of you joining us here for this event, for this opportunity. Sometimes when we are publicizing events, and especially when we don't get necessarily weeks and weeks to prepare for it, we're never sure how many people are going to turn up. But the striking thing to us, I think, in the Shetikva office was the second we put this up, within almost an hour, over 30 people had registered. And ultimately, over 70 people registered to be part of this event and to have this opportunity to hear from our guests, our friends from Kibbutz Magen in the south. And I think that speaks to the fact that our hearts are with you. Yehuda Levi famously said, "My heart is in the east and I am in the furthest most west." And that sense of the connection that we feel to Israel, that we feel to the people there and what you are going through is a really powerful connection that when we have the opportunity to hear firsthand, it is something that we need to do to bear witness and to hear stories and then to be able to share stories as well. Because that's our job as friends, as a community, to offer our support. And so with this evening, we are so blessed to have from Kibbutz Magen itself, Gilad and Sharon, who are coming and will share some of their experiences about the kibbutz, and Alon, who is the one who has been organizing their visit and this event for all of us. And just to begin with, we're going to show a video so that you can get a sense about Kibbutz Magen, and then Alon will take over for at least the first section with our speakers before we open up a little bit later.
We always hope and we are optimistic about the future, and if we weren't optimistic, we won't live here.
Palestinians or people from Gaza were here. They worked in the kibbutz. They stayed in our homes. We knew their families. They were like members of our family. From 2007, when they were not allowed to come and work in Israel anymore, we worried about them, about their welfare, and we were busy trying to help them. We sent food to Gaza, toys for the children, anything we can do. And it was really frustrating that people who were like members of our family are not allowed to come and work with us and stay with us. In October 7th, it was a holiday in Israel, Simchat Torah. My son, who doesn't live on the kibbutz, came with his family, came to be with us for the holiday.
October 7th, 6:30 in the morning, we all woke up to a very unusual attack and launching of rockets.
And I immediately sent a message to everyone, lock your houses, and we're waiting for the army to arrive.
It was horrible. It was horrific. There's no other way to convey the fear and the worry.
It was a death threat, and my wife said goodbye to the kids and sent them all the bank accounts.
By all means, all hell broke loose outside. Gunshots and rockets and explosions and war. It was a war zone. The army arrived at 2:30 and we were allowed to leave the safe room, not our houses, around 4:30 after the kibbutz was declared safe.
The army came and said, "You have to go. You have an hour. Pack whatever you can." This was one of the worst experiences I could never imagine I will have to face. Being evacuated from home, like refugees, getting close from strange people.
I was sharing one room with my husband and my 2 teenagers for 2 months.
Everybody with the same look on their face, something between being half dead and helpless.
So it wasn't a coincidence. The squad was ready. They're heroes by all means. They prevented the terrorists from getting into the houses, and that's why we're sitting here and talking about it. People will return to Magen only if they feel safe enough to return.
We need to be able to convey a message of we will grow from this catastrophe and trauma, and we will make this place better than it used to.
We treated our businesses as we treated our community. That means we didn't let go anything. 2 days after to irrigate the fields, and the factory was open 2 weeks after October 7th. The business side is making the money, but is making it for the community itself, which is our gardening and our education, our buildings. We are in the right direction to make it very successful in the years to come.
If we want people not just to stay, but to join us, we need to give them a chance to find a job, education, health.
And if there will not be a future generation in these kibbutzim, young people won't come to Kibbutz Magen, and the average age of the people here will be 70. In 10 years, we will be gone.
We're looking for partners, we're looking for friends, we're looking for a hug and long-term relationships that we can connect to communities, people to people. The kibbutz requires, for example, building a new safe room for elementary school kids, renovating an existing structure that is underused to a learning center, that the kids have acquired gaps in their learning abilities during these past months. We do require to renovate the swimming pool, which is an important aspect of community cohesion. Magen in Hebrew means shield, and as we are the shield for the state of Israel, we are turning to the Jewish community around the world to be our shield and to help us through this hardship.
Good evening, Shir Tikva. My name is Elon Madar. Thank you very much for having us. First of all, I'd like to thank Rabbi Berkman, who, when we reached out for the first time, identified the opportunity in having this kind of a conversation between Kibbutz Magen and the Shir Tikva community. Thank you all for showing up here tonight. My name again is Elon Madar, and I've been working with Kibbutz Magen for nearly a year now on building these relationships and communities with other Jewish communities across the world. Most of you probably know that kibbutzim are self-sustained, closed communities, and the interaction with the external world happens, but only when it's necessary. However, October 7th changed everything. I'm not going to create any spoilers here because Sharon and Gilad are going to be the ones telling their stories from October 7th. And I think that without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Gilad.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Come tonight to that evening. My name is Gilad Blanc. I am 41 years old, and I'm single, and I'm the head of the community and the chairman of Kibbutz Magen. And in addition, I am in the Army Reserve. I'm a lieutenant colonel, and my role, in my role, I am the battle commander of the Southern Brigade into the Gaza Division. And now I'm speaking Hebrew and Alon translate me. Okay? We start, בהתחלה נדבר על האזור שאנחנו חיים בו.
We will begin by speaking of the region that we live in.
ועל המשמעות שלו, ואחרי זה נדבר על הקיבוץ ועל הסיפור שלי, ובסוף קצת על תקווה.
After speaking about the region, we will talk about Magen, the kibbutz itself and the community, and from there we're going to dive into Gilad's personal accounts.
You can put the maps? Okay.
Where do we point the clicker? תכוון לשם.
אוקיי. אוקיי, we start.
We'll start.
קיבוץ מגן נמצא במועצה אזורית אשכול.
Kibbutz Magen is situated in the regional council of Eshkol.
במועצה יש לנו 32 יישובים ו-17,000 אנשים שחיים בה.
In the regional council of Eshkol, there are 32 communities, which sum up to nearly 17,000 residents.
למעשה, אנחנו קהילה אחת גדולה שמורכבת מהרבה מאוד קהילות קטנות.
In fact, we are one large community that is comprised of smaller communities.
לכל קהילה יש את המאפיינים שלה ואת הייחודיות שלה.
Each community has its own characteristics and its own uniqueness.
אז איפה למעשה אנחנו נמצאים? You can... Now? Okay. Jerusalem, it's here, and Tel Aviv, it's here. This is the Gaza Strip. And in the yellow point, this is קיבוץ מגן. אנחנו נמצאים 62 מייל מתל אביב.
We are located 62 miles from Tel Aviv,
28 מייל מבאר שבע,
28 miles from Beersheba to the east,
ו-12 מייל ממצרים.
and 12 miles from Egypt on the southwest. Next slide.
This is the border, Gaza Strip, קיבוץ מגן, and the black line, it's the road 232. הכביש הזה מאוד חשוב, כי הוא מחלק את המועצה לשני חלקים.
Route 232 is important to be aware of because it separates the regional council into two parts.
קיבוץ מגן נמצא מאוד קרוב לכביש, ולמעשה נמצא 3 מייל מהגבול עם עזה.
So the Route 232 separates into the west side, which is closer to the Gaza Strip, and the east side. Kibbutz Magen is located on the west side of Route 232, putting it approximately 3 miles away from Rafah.
מערבית לכביש יש 9 יישובים במועצה שלנו, ומגן הוא אחד מהם.
West of 232, there are 9 communities that are part of the Eshkol Regional Council. Kibbutz Magen is one of those communities.
והכביש הזה הוא ציר התנועה המרכזי בתוך המועצה.
Route 232 serves as the main traffic route for the Regional Council of Eshkol.
וב-7 באוקטובר המחבלים הצליחו להשתלט על הכביש הזה.
On October 7th, the terrorists took over control of this specific route.
אז קצת היסטוריה על קיבוץ מגן.
A little bit of history about Magen.
קיבוץ מגן עלה על הקרקע ב-16/8/1949.
Kibbutz Magen was established in August of 1949.
אנחנו נמצאים בנגב המערבי.
We're located in the western part of the Negev.
קיבוץ נוסד על ידי גרעין של השומר הצעיר מרומניה, ובהמשך השנים הצטרפו אליו עוד גרעינים גם מאירופה וגם מהארץ.
So the first group of Hashomer Hatzair activists were Romanian young adults who made Aliyah to Israel and established the kibbutz. And over the year, additional groups of Hashomer Hatzair activists joined the core group.
השם שנבחר מגן אומר 3 דברים.
The name that was chosen for the kibbutz, Magen, shield, has 3 meanings.
מגן העם, מגן המולדת,
The shield of the people, shield of the nation,
ומגן מעמד הפועלים.
and the shield of the status of the workers.
כמה מספרים חשובים על הקיבוץ.
Some important numbers about the kibbutz.
גודל האוכלוסייה הוא 500 אנשים,
500 residents occupy the kibbutz.
מתוכם 130 הם ילדים.
Of them, 130 are children.
במהלך המלחמה נפגעו בקיבוץ 20 בתים.
During the fighting, 20 structures were hit by the terrorists.
יש לנו 2 חברים שנהרגו.
2 community members were murdered on that day.
2 חברים שנפצעו.
2 additional community members who were seriously injured.
11 חודשים היינו מפונים ולא יכלנו לחיות בבית.
Kibbutz Magen was evacuated on October 7th to a Dead Sea hotel, which they remained displaced for 11 months.
ויש לנו עוד 5 חברים שהלכו לעולמם, שחלק זה בגלל הצער והמצב שהיה.
Due to the poor state of the community, after October 7th, 5 additional community members passed away because of grief and resilience.
חלק מהחיים שלנו כקהילה, אנחנו מנהלים הרבה מאוד דברים משותפים ביחד.
As part of our life as a community, we share many aspects of life together.
יש לנו שירותים שאנחנו נותנים לחברי הקהילה.
We provide services to community members,
חינוך,
such as education,
חדר אוכל,
a dining hall,
סופרמרקט,
a grocery store,
מכבסה,
a laundromat,
פינת חי, ליטל זו,
a petting corner,
בריכה משותפת,
a swimming pool,
נוי,
the landscaping,
שירותי בריאות ורווחה.
and generalized medical and welfare services.
יש לנו גם עסקים משותפים.
We also have joint businesses.
יש לנו מפעל
We have a factory
שמייצר קולטי שמש,
that that manufactures solar panels that
שלכן
are intended to heat water pools or water in pools.
יש לנו רפת,
We have a dairy farm,
ויש לנו 20,000 דונם של גידולי חקלאות.
and about 10,000 acres of field crops.
אנחנו מגדלים גזרים,
We grow carrots,
בוטנים,
peanuts,
חיטה,
wheat,
תפוחי אדמה,
potatoes,
צנוניות,
radishes,
אבוקדו,
avocado,
חוכובה.
and jojoba.
כמה מילים על הסיפור שלי בשביעי לעשירי.
This is my personal account from October 7th.
אז כמו שאמרתי, אני סגן אלוף במילואים,
I'm a lieutenant colonel on reserve duty,
ואני למעשה מנהל הלחימה של החטיבה הדרומית באוגדת עזה.
and in fact I'm in charge of the combat division in the Aza brigade.
בשביעי לעשירי, אני איש המילואים הראשון שהצליח להגיע לחטיבה ולסייע בלחימה.
On October 7th, I was the first reserve individual who was able to make it to the war room in the brigade and manage the fighting.
בתחילת הקרב נהרג מפקד החטיבה, קולונל אסף חממי.
As the fighting ensued, the Colonel Asaf Hamami Zichrono Livracha, who was the commanding chief of the brigade, was murdered.
והסגן שלו נפצע.
His deputy was injured.
ולמעשה לקחתי פיקוד על החטיבה למשך 5 שעות עד שהגיע מפקד חדש.
I was the next person in command, and I was in command of the brigade in the combat for 5 hours until a new chief came.
בזמן שאני מנסה לעזור לשאר היישובים ולהביא להם כוחות צבא כדי שיגנו עליהם, התנהל מחוץ לחדר המלחמה שלנו קרב בתוך הבסיס.
As I'm struggling to get help and military forces to the communities within our vicinity, to get military forces to get there and help them during the fighting, within our base, I had to manage fighting with terrorists as well.
לאחר שהצלחנו להדוף את המחבלים, המשכתי במילואים עוד 140 ימים, בנוסף לזה שניהלתי את הקיבוץ.
We repelled the terrorists from the base and from the communities, and from there on I stayed on reserve duty for an additional 140 days.
בזמן הזה שמעתי על הרבה חברים שלי שנהרגים, על אחיינית שלי שנהרגה.
During this time, many of my friends died. My niece was murdered.
וגם בתוך הקהילה שלנו, גם המשפחה שלי הייתה סגורה בתוך הממ"ד 24 שעות.
And in my community, in my family was in the safe room for several hours.
אז קהילת מגן בשביעי לעשירי הייתה בממ"דים במשך 24 שעות.
The community of Magen on October 7th spent 24 hours inside their safe rooms.
בזמן הזה כיתת הכוננות של הקיבוץ הצליחה להדוף את ההתקפות של המחבלים על הבית שלנו.
And during this time, the Kibbutz's Ready Unit managed to repel time and time again the several waves of terrorists that attempted infiltrating our homes.
בזמן שאנשים נמצאים סגורים בתוך הממ"ד שלהם, הם מקבלים הודעות, היום בוואטסאפ, בטלפון, על כל הזוועות שקורות במועצה ובקיבוצים השכנים.
As the community members were locked in their safe rooms, they were fed updates from what was going on in communities around through WhatsApp and other digital means.
אנחנו קהילה קטנה, כל המועצה, וכולם מכירים את כולם, וכל אחד שומע על הזוועות, ומנסה להבין איפה האנשים שהוא אוהב ושהוא מכיר נמצאים.
We are a small regional council, which makes us a small community, so most of us know most of us. And as the time passed, we were trying to collect more information on what was going on with our loved ones in other communities.
לאחר קרב קשה, רק בצהריים, חברי הקהילה הבינו שהצלחנו להדוף את המחבלים.
After long hours of fighting within the kibbutz, it wasn't until noon that the community members understood that we managed to repel the terrorists.
תנסו לעצום את העיניים רגע ולדמיין שאתה נמצא סגור בתוך חדר, מנותק ממה שקורה בחוץ ומקבל מידע ממה שקורה במועצה.
Try closing your eyes and imagining what it would be like to sit locked up in a room for hours, disconnected from the world, knowing that something major is going on outside, but the only news and updates you're getting is fed through digital and informal means.
ואתה רק מחכה לרגע שיפרצו גם אליך הביתה.
And the only thing that keeps popping in your head is, when are the terrorists going to reach my home?
על מה חושבים, מה מקווים, מה עושים בשעות האחרונות, שזה מה שאתה חושב שיכול להיות.
When you think that you're about to die, what do you think about? What do you imagine? What occupies your mind?
כל הדבר הזה יוצר טראומה מאוד גדולה, גם ברמה האישית וגם בקהילה.
These circumstances created a big trauma in the community, as a community, and the individuals making the community.
בזמן הקרב נהרגו לנו שני חברים.
Next slide, please. During the battle, we lost 2 community members.
אבי פליישר נהרג בזמן הקרב בהגנה על הקיבוץ.
Avi Fleischer was murdered as he was defending the kibbutz.
ואופיר ירון נהרג בכניסה לקיבוץ כשהוא ניסה להגיע חזרה ולעזור לכיתת כוננות.
Ophir Yaron was that morning in another community, and as he was making his way back to Kibbutz Magen to help and to defend, he was caught up by the terrorists and murdered at the entrance to the kibbutz.
בנוסף נפצע נדב כשבא לעזור לטפל באבי.
Nadav, who came out to help Avi, was injured.
וברוך, שהוא הרבש"ץ, אחראי הביטחון של הקיבוץ, נפצע גם כן.
And the kibbutz's head of security, Baruch, was seriously injured as well.
אחרי יומיים, ב9 לחודש, הקיבוץ התפנה לים המלח למלון אנג'וי, שם קצת סוריאליסטי באותה תקופה.
2 days later, on October 9th, the community was evacuated and displaced to a hotel in the Dead Sea with a surreal name of Enjoy.
והתקופה של הפינוי היא תקופה לא פשוטה, שבה התחלנו לשקם את הקהילה ולבנות אותה מחדש.
The evacuation period was a difficult time, but we had to set our mind into rehabilitating the community and start building a future.
טיפלנו נפשית באנשים, במשפחות.
We provided mental health assistance to individuals and to families.
תזכרו שכולם בעצם בטראומה.
Keep in mind that an entire community is traumatized.
התחלנו ישר לטפל בבתים שנפגעו ולשקם אותם.
We started tending and rehabilitating structures in the kibbutz that were hit.
ויצרנו הרבה מקומות שבהם אפשר לשתף את החוויה ואת הטראומה ולהיזכר במי שנהרג.
And we created opportunities for communities members to process the trauma that they are in by speaking of what happened on that day and remembering their loved ones that have fallen.
השיתוף נותן לאנשים כוח ותקווה ועוצמה.
Sharing gives people, empowers them, and helps them heal.
ואחד הדברים החשובים שהתחלנו לעשות זה לתת לאנשים שליטה מחדש על החיים שלהם.
And one of the first and very important things that we sought to do is to give people the control back over their lives.
בחודש אפריל החלטנו שחוזרים הביתה, שזה הדבר הכי חשוב לנו והכי משמעותי כדי לשקם את הנפש שלנו.
In April 2024, as a community, we made the decision that it's time to go home.
עשינו את זה למרות שהמלחמה לא נגמרה והרעשים שלה נשמעים כל הזמן בקיבוץ.
We did so despite the war is still raging and the explosions are still being heard in the kibbutz.
אבל ראינו כמה זה חשוב לאנשים וכמה זה חשוב בבריאות הנפשית שלהם.
But the importance and centrality of being able to go back home was of utmost importance for the rehabilitation of the community.
לנו יש את ההבנה שלמעשה איפה שאנחנו נמצאים קובע את הגבול של המדינה.
We live under the understanding that where we live is actually where the border of Israel draws.
ולמרות האסון, אנחנו חושבים שאפשר לצמוח ממנו. ובמהלך חודש אוגוסט חגגנו 75 שנים לעלייה לקרקע.
And despite the disaster, we still believe that we can grow from this. And this past August, we celebrated the kibbutz's 75th anniversary.
כאשר הקיבוץ נוסד, חרטנו על דגלנו שהקיבוץ יהיה מקום בטוח ובית ליהודים ויקיים קהילה משגשגת ופורחת.
When the kibbutz was established, we decided that our values would be values of education, of a flourishing community, and what was the first one?
וככה ב-75 השנים האחרונות חידשנו את ההצהרה הזאת.
And for the past 75 years, we believe that we've been renewing these vows to the community and to the state of Israel, and we did so by celebrating our 75th anniversary.
אנחנו הקיבוץ הראשון שחזר הביתה ממערב לכביש 232.
We are the first community to have returned home west of Route 232.
ואנחנו רואים את עצמנו כמי שמובילים את החזרה הביתה.
And we see ourselves as leaders and exemplifiers to other communities of the importance of returning back home.
היום נמצאים בקיבוץ 95% מהקהילה.
Today, 95% of the community have returned to the kibbutz,
וה5% הנותרים יחזרו בשנה הקרובה.
and the additional 5% are expected to return within the next 12 months.
זאת למעשה התמונת ניצחון שלנו, ושנותנת הרבה כוח גם לקהילה שלנו, אבל לכל אזרחי ישראל.
And to us, this is what victory looks like, and this victory gives us power, but not only us, the entire state of Israel.
אולי אחד הדברים הכי חשובים שלמדנו באותה תקופה, היא מהי ערבות הדדית.
Perhaps one of the most important things that we've been learning over the past few months was arvut hadadit, mutual bonds.
ומבחינתנו ערבות הדדית יש לה 3 דברים מרכזיים.
And in our view, arvut hadadit has 3 central components.
הראשון זה בין אחד לשני.
The first, between man and woman.
השני זה בין הקהילות והקיבוצים הקרובים לנו, וגם בצפון הרחוק, שנמצא גם כן במלחמה.
The second central component is the connection between the arvut hadadit between the communities in the region and the communities up north who are living an impossible reality.
והשלישי, זאת הסיבה שאנחנו כאן היום, זה הקשר עם היהודים בכל העולם, בטח שכאן בבוסטון.
And the third component in arvut hadadit is the connection between Kibbutz Magen and American Jewry, and specifically the Boston Jewish community, as this is our second visit here.
ערבות הדדית היא למעשה לדעת שאתה לא לבד, שיש מישהו שיתמוך בך ויעזור לך ברגעי משבר וגם ברגעים הטובים.
Arvut hadadit is knowing that you're never alone, that somebody is there to be with you in times of trials and in times of happiness.
היא למעשה לדעת שיש מישהו שרואה אותך, I see you.
It's in fact knowing that somebody sees you.
אנחנו אומרים לכם שאנחנו מעריכים את זה, שהקהילה שלכם פתחה בפנינו את הדלת, לשמוע את הסיפור שלנו ולהיות שותפי גורל, שהוא הגורל של כל היהודים היום בעולם.
I'm extending my appreciation to you and to your community for opening up your hearts and your doors to let us tell our story and share it with you and the rest of the world.
ורק ביחד נצליח להעיף את החושך הגדול ולהדליק אור גדול.
And only together will we succeed in repelling the darkness and bringing in a great light.
אנחנו יודעים שלמרות האסון אנחנו נתאושש, אנחנו נגדל, אנחנו נמשיך לבנות את הארץ ואת הקיבוץ, ונמשיך להיות אור בכל העולם כמו כל היהודים. Thank you.
Despite the disaster, we know that we will continue to grow and make life better for our communities and for the communities within the region. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Younger. I'm 48 years old. I'm married to Scott and a mother of 2 teens, Yuval, who is 17, and Tom, who is 13. I was born and raised my entire life in Kibbutz Magen. And before I begin, I feel I should say this talk is going to be much more personal, much more revealing than I've ever spoken before. It may be overwhelming at times, so please bear with me. And before I jump into what it's like to grow up in a kibbutz and in Magen in particular, I feel like I need to give you some family background. My parents are both European. My dad is Swiss. My mother's family is originally from Krakow, Poland, and after surviving the Holocaust, they settled in Vienna, Austria, where my mom was born. Both parents were in Hashomer Tza'ir youth movement and met during a summer camp. My father followed the footsteps of his sister and made Aliyah and arrived in Kibbutz Magen. My older sister, Smada, was born in 1971. And me and my twin, Rinat, were born in 1976. Yes, I have an identical sister, so if you're in Israel and you pass by and I ignore you, it's not me, it's her. When I was about 3, we were joined by another older sister, older than my older sister, Dalia, who was adopted. We were her adopting family in the kibbutz. She was originally from Dimona. During the week, she was in the kibbutz, and during the weekends, went back to her family. Up until the early 90s, children in Magen were being raised in children's houses. It wasn't only due to ideological reasons, but to practical ones as well. At the beginning, kibbutzim had very limited resources. So when they had the funds, they would invest it in future generations. For example, the first concrete floor was poured in a children's house. The first air conditioner was installed in a children's house. Children's houses were the method of education in the kibbutzim, and it basically started on the day of birth, yes, on the day of birth, and went on until adulthood. As being the first set of twins for years, actually, to be born on Kibbutz Magen, you can imagine the excitement of the entire community. And since my twin and I were preemies, my mother was allowed to keep us at home for the first 3 months. So from the age of 3 months, minus 2 years, I have not lived in the same household as my parents. I shared my days and nights with a group of children, all about the same age, adults that took care of us during the day, and one kibbutz member who was on duty during the nights and overlooked all of the children's houses at night. Each children's house had a hall, a dining room, a classroom, bedrooms. In each bedroom there were 3 to 4 kids, and a bathroom. This is where we spent all of our days, and we're allowed to go to our parents' house for 3 hours a day in the afternoon hours, usually after our parents got up from their nap. And basically this enabled the adults to have a good night's sleep and be more productive at work, which was extremely physical. The kids who were with me
Yeah, that one. The kids who are with me in the children's house, I'm actually in the big picture on your right, are my brothers and sisters to this day. My mother, who was raised differently in Vienna, was adamant that she wanted her small family to live together in one household, and she convinced my dad and the kibbutz to allow the family to head for a shlichut in HaShomer HaTzair youth movement, and she insisted that it will be in an English-speaking country so her girls would benefit. So I found myself living in LA for 2 years between the age of 11 to 13 for the first time in my life under the same roof as my parents, hence the English, if you were wondering. When we returned, I was given a room to share with 2 other teen girls from my age group and have lived independently since. At the age of 14, we also joined the regional boarding school called Mossad Chinuchi, translates to Educational Institute, with other teens from neighboring kibbutzim from a regional council. The Mossad practically replicated kibbutz community in miniature form, with its own facilities, committees, cultural branches, and traditions. If you think about it, I actually multiplied the number of sisters and brothers I had. The Mossad was adjacent to the regional high school and operated from 8 p.m. to the morning after when we got up or not and walked to the classrooms. I'm telling you all this to try and explain how well connected all of the kibbutzim in the region are, or all of the communities. As Gilad was explaining, it's a relatively small community of about 17,000 residents from 32 kibbutzim and moshavim, but it was much smaller when I grew up. In the Mossad, we worked with teens older and younger than us. We were mentored and we were mentors. We were their friends and their family members. Connections sometimes resulted in marriage and other times in long-lasting friendships. Growing up in the kibbutz is truly a perfect experience for a child, especially during the times I grew up in. Rules were perceived as recommendations. We were basically free to do whatever we wanted. We were educated under the values of diligence, of caring for the group and contributing to the community. Sleeping in children's houses ended in Kibbutz Magen during the Gulf War in the 90s, when parents wanted their children close by. Makes sense. Today, children's houses are used similarly to daycare centers, open until 4 p.m., when children are taken by their parents to their homes where they spend the nights. When I grew up, there were 2 regional high schools and 2 regional elementary schools, one for the kibbutzim and one for the moshavim. Younger kids were educated each in their own community. Today, there is 1 regional high school for both moshavim and kibbutzim, and 3 regional elementary schools, all of which are fully sheltered, so kids and teens do not need to leave their classroom, only remain seated. My children are attending classes with kids from the region, going to after-school activities with kids from the area. Their teachers and staff from their schools are faces they may see in local events or cultural gatherings. They visit their friends' houses regularly, meet their parents and their neighbors. It's a small community. So on October 7th, as the hours passed by, while we were sitting helplessly in the shelter room, gunshots and explosions are clearly heard, and we were exposed through social media, as you can see, my daughter is showing me TikTok, to the atrocities that occurred in nearby communities. You can now imagine what it felt like. The night of October 6th, I spent with the same childhood friends from nearby kibbutzim. The first message I received the morning of October 7th was in that WhatsApp group. The first pieces of news about who had been kidnapped, murdered, set on fire were in that group. And since my friends all live or used to live, in nearby kibbutzim, I very early that day heard what was going on in the region. Heard, but did not comprehend. Very similarly, my daughter receives news about her friends' cries for help, of her friends being murdered and kidnapped. Just to give you a sense of how these people are connected to us, I prepared a graphic illustrating some, not all, I couldn't fit them all, of those we knew. Various connections, some I knew personally, some through my kids, and I'll try to focus on 3 stories that are examples of 3 different types of connections. And it was a very hard process to choose who I will be focusing on. And I chose these 3. So Nurit and Amiram Cooper. Nurit is 79 years old. Amiram, known to everyone as Cooper, was 85 years old. Both were brutally kidnapped from Niroz on October 7th. Nurit was released with Yochke Lifshitz wounded 14 days after they were kidnapped. Cooper was left behind. Nurit and Cooper are parents of Rotem, Ravit, and Lotan. Ravit was in my class. And Rotem married Daria, my sister, who I grew up in Magen as my older adopted sister. The family was notified Cooper died at the beginning of June. His body is still held captive by Hamas. He left his wife, Nurit, 3 children and 9 grandchildren. Cooper was an economist and a poet. His legacy is the many poems he wrote and his amazing family. Elad Katzir and his mother, Hannah, were also kidnapped from Niroz the morning of October 7th. Hannah, who is 77 years old, was released. Upon her release, she found out her husband, Rami, was murdered, and her son, Elad, was kidnapped. Her health has deteriorated, and she has been suffering from heart problems ever since. Elad was a classmate of mine. A friend from Magen who communicated that day with him said he wrote to her that he was leaving the safe room to assist those who cried for help in the local WhatsApp group. He just couldn't ignore them. 2 movies of Elad were published by Hamas during his time in captivity, the first in December, the second in January. 183 days after being kidnapped, the IDF published that he was murdered by his captives, probably right after the second movie was filmed. His body was extracted from Khan Yunis in April, and he was laid to rest in Niroz. My son's best friend of his entire elementary school is Eitan Yahalomi. Eitan was kidnapped with his mother and 2 sisters to Gaza on 2 motorbikes, while his wounded father was being taken as well separately. The story of how Batsheva, Eitan's mother, managed to escape with her 2 daughters minutes before entering Gaza is mind-blowing. You should look it up if you're interested. But the motorcycle Eitan was on kept going with him into Gaza. Eitan was held alone for 16 long days in which he was forced to watch movies of the horrors of October 7th before being released after 52 days. He had no idea his mother and sisters managed to escape. Eitan is one of the most gentle and sensitive teens I have ever met. I can't imagine what he was going through. In one of his stories, he said that while he was forced to watch the horror movies, he was threatened not to cry or he will be shot dead. I met Ohad, his father, through Eitan's and Tom's friendship, dropping him off in Niroz, picking him up, and the kids picking him up, and the kids are asking for a few more minutes to play while I chat with Batsheva and Ohad over a cup of coffee. Ohad is still held in Gaza. A movie of him wounded but alive was published by Hamas in January. It is truly hard to believe this is our lives, our reality, that the faces of the people you know as kidnapped are our colleagues, our friends, our teachers, esteemed individuals that have contributed to who I am today, that I used to meet in various cultural gatherings or parents' meetings, innocent civilians that one morning were just torn from their loved ones, brutally separated from their community. 11 months have passed. 11 months filled with longing and worry. 11 months that every piece of news with the word deal or retaliation, bombing, compromise, cabinet meetings shakes every part of our being. 11 months of waiting. So despite the fact that we in Magen have been fortunate enough to return home, we cannot fully rehabilitate until all the members of our greater community are brought back. Thank you for listening.
We named this visit to Boston 95-5, because if you ask anyone living at the Gaza envelope, the Otef, any border-adjacent community that lives down there will tell you our life here is 95% paradise and 5% hell. And the past 11 months have been hell. But there is still hope. And if I'd like to connect this story of the community of Magen to the larger story of Jews around the world, the similarities between what one community, small community, and what we as a people have endured in history and over years, I think it's safe to say that we have never been strong by numbers. That has never been what has made us who we are and what we are today. I was born in the States to an Israeli family, and I grew up between both countries. And I've devoted my life for the past 15 years to build bridges between American Jews and Israelis because our connections have been not so well in the past few years. And when we set out to come to Boston in June, we didn't really know what to expect. But I was given a very specific task by the kibbutz, and that was, we need a community. We need to build a community outside of what we know because we need to feel stronger through these connections. And if anything else can be said about us Jews is that only in the face of adversity and in the face of battle and fighting do we know how to seek each other out, and the 5 separate fingers turn into a fist. I'd also like to acknowledge, if you did not know this, that you, personally and as a community, in every deed and gesture of kindness and compassion that you have shown anyone in Israel since October 7th, has been what has given us the power to wake up in the morning and stretch out that day for 11 months. So whatever it is that you're doing, please don't stop. If you feel like you haven't been doing much, do more. We'll be more than happy to help you figure that one out. But at the end of the day, we still have one big question that will probably follow us for a very long time, which is, where is this bond going? What is the future of the bond between Israelis and American Jews? And this week, we're noting 9/11. I was here for 9/11. I was living in New Jersey. I saw everything from my living room. The first plane hit the first building, and the second plane hit the second building. Side note, I was a flight attendant at that time. Just returned myself from a flight 10 minutes before 7:45 a.m. on that day, 23 years ago. And what I see that connects 9/11 and October 7th, and perhaps gives us a good enough reason to ponder positively about our connection, is that in both cases, we're looking at the diminishment of hope. It's not about how bad things look now or looked on October 7th. It's how worse will they get. And at this point, I'm turning to the Haftarah of this week. And with your permission, I will read out the opening and the closing verse of, I believe, which is the shortest Haftarah, that we know. Well, you're going to stay here. Shout, O barren one, you who bore no child. Shout aloud for joy, you who did not travail. For the children of the wife forlorn shall outnumber those of the espoused, said the Lord. Oroni akara lo yalada, pitzchi rina vetzahali. Lo chala, ki rabim bnei shomema, mibnei be'ula, amar Adonai. For this to me is like the waters of Noah. As I swore that the waters of Noah never more would flood the earth, so I swear that I will not be angry with you or rebuke you. For the mountains may move and the hills be shaken, but my loyalty shall never move from you, nor my covenant of friendship be shaken, said the Lord, who takes you back in love. Ki mei Noach zot li, asher nishbati me'avor mei Noach, od al haaretz, כן נשבעתי מקצוף עלייך ומגאור בך, כי ההרים ימושו, והגבעות תמותנה, וחסדי מאיתך לא ימוש, וברית שלומי לא תמוד, אמר מרחמך אדוני. If a barren can cry out and have hope, I believe that we have hope also. It's up to you, and it's up to us. And we invite you to continue this conversation with us from now until whichever day you choose to. So thank you for this opportunity.
So we begin by saying thank you for your words and for sharing your stories with us and opening up in this way, and just let you know that you have friends here at Shir Tikva, and as the name of the synagogue, as the founders wanted, it is a song of hope. And we will help provide that hope and be that hope with you in the days, weeks, months, and years that lie ahead. We do have a bit of time for some questions for our speakers. I'm going to make that request that we always do. Please do keep the questions brief so that we can focus on hearing from them. And we can open the floor for a little bit if there's questions.
What can we do to help you?
So the question was, what can we do to help?
Oh, it's a good question. We need only our friends in the world. We have everything, but we need to feel the hug of the communities in all over the place.
I think that
Can I be more specific? You need people to pick, like your crops, are they going to need to be picked this fall? So you need people to do that?
the kibbutz community, 90% of it returned. So they are, workers are back. I think that first and foremost, we would very much like you to share what you heard today. Share what you heard from first account. Fight whatever disinformation and lies are spread, and you guys hear them daily. And we would like to extend a personal invitation. If you're in Israel, you are more than welcome to come and visit and see for yourself the amazing region and the amazing community that we are working so hard to rebuild and rehabilitate.
Go ahead, Sam.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that my heart goes out to you for what you've been through. It's horrific, and no one should ever have to go through what you've been through. So I really feel for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
How did security break down that allowed this terrible thing to happen?
So
What-
the question
what was the
how did
question?
security break down
I
to
asked
allow
myself that
On
every
October
Question.
7th, or Do you want to specify your question
On this October 6th.
So,
in terms of Kibbutz Magen?
תתרגם לי רגע.
in terms of
השאלה היא-
Kibbutz Magen,
I know I have a friend that is familiar with the area. He told me one time recently that if a cat crossed the line at the border, only hell would break loose.
I asked myself that repeatedly. We were being told that this barrier is unbreachable, that there's enough technology and there's enough IDF soldiers that are protecting us. Obviously, that wasn't true. I think that our emergency team responded amazingly well. They fought a courageous battle for hours on their own. They managed to prevent the terrorists from reaching the first line of houses. The losses are horrible, but they're nothing compared to what other communities have experienced. They were ready, they were armed, and our fate could have been identical to Niroz's, which is 1 kilometer, which is how many miles?
Half a mile.
Half a mile. You know, you could just run it.
The difference, it's only 2 minutes. In Kibbutz Magen, we have more 2 minutes between Niroz and us, and this is only the difference, because the army that came to Magen and Niroz, and we fight alone. And everybody say the fence on the border, it's something can't cross, but it's only a fence. It's take 10 minutes to blow it. And the problem is the army think the technology, the fence, the Modin intelligence, the intelligence give
Notification or alert.
notification, and everything grows. And the difference between Magen and Niroz is only 2 minutes. The red unit go to the first line of houses, manage the fight between the fence and the first line. We have open 200 meters between the fence and the first line of houses, and this is the difference.
I hope somebody will be able to answer that question one day.
It's a question that, if to take the silk gloves off, everybody is asking that question, all of us. The more layers of the story of October 7th, right? The more layers we peel off, the more questions we have there. If the question behind the question is where to point the finger, you'll need more than one finger to point. Because a fiasco this size, in my mind at least, cannot be laid on a single authority or single cause. If we had another 2 days here and you would hear the history of what the communities had to endure in terms of opening up educational frameworks, fortifying houses, how safe are they in their own communities in the discourse with the military and other security forces, then there are a lot of question marks. But, you know, American Jews have been nation building until the mid-90s, right, with philanthropy and donations. And then in the mid-90s, we understood, wait a minute, we don't need to build a nation anymore because we're a startup nation. So we switched out to society building. And during this time of society building, we probably forgot a few things along the way. So there's no specific answer, but there's a very localized reply, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Have members of other kibbutzim in the eastern or the western region of your district been able to return home yet?
They were all told, the Tkuma administration set the deadline for all communities to vacate hotels or interim living solutions and return back to the communities by August 15th. The exclusion to this rule are the communities that were hit so bad that structures and homes and community life cannot be led there, and as well as other localized communities who are in specific deliberations with the Tkuma administration on extending the period where they're staying in a hotel due to the poor state of the community itself. At the end of the day, it's all a question of money and the ability of the state to extend these services. I remind you that there is another war going on in the northern front of Israel. If we weren't in a house of worship, I would use more elaborate language to describe what's going on there. Yeah.
First, I'd like to say I'm sorry for what you've gone through. I can't imagine. Hindsight's 2020. Out of curiosity, since you live so close to the Gaza border, in hindsight, did you witness that they have been practicing for something like this at all? And would you have thought now that maybe that you would have seen it? And the other question is, are there bathrooms and kitchens and food in the safe houses?
So the safe house is a safe room. It's a room in the house. Once you're locked in, you have no access. So they were in for 36 hours without access to food, or well, till 24 hours, no access to food and bathrooms. The stories that you hear of families having to spend this time together, several generations, and how having to tend to older grandparents as they have to use the restroom while they're in the safe room with their kids and the grandkids. These are traumatizing events. And to answer the first question, השאלה הייתה אם ראיתם בעיניים שלכם כאילו הכנה מראש או שהם מתאמנים לפני כן?
Yes, we saw. But all the time, the army says it's only a training. It's not going to be a war. It's a normal. And before the October 7th, Hamas do it הפגנות.
Demonstrations.
Very close to the fence. And actually now we know this is the training and do it, putting the weapon very close to the fence. And yeah, we saw.
So thank you for coming. It's the story that needs to be heard. In the video that you introduced to us, I was really, I guess, touched by the comments about how much you cared about the people in Gaza and how they were part of your family and you cared what was happening to them when they couldn't come to work. And yet now we have October 7th and we have this atrocity that happens that is coming from these people from Gaza. And we learn of people who we thought we knew were our friends, perhaps were not our friends. And now we have a situation where we have retaliation in Gaza, and we have many innocent Gazan Palestinians who are also being killed. And it seems like we are having two peoples who are being traumatized by what has happened. And my question for you, and perhaps it's not a fair question, but maybe it's one that I'd love to hear your answer, is can you ever have that feeling back again? Can these two people have a conversation? And is there a path forward that you see? Thank you.
Not all the people in Gaza, it's a evil or bad people. Actually, before 20 years ago, people from Gaza works in Kibbutz Magen. Hamas, it's not all the people, and we want a peace, we want to, I don't know if friends, but live together in, yeah, I think it's it can be. The problem it's not the people, the problem it's the politician people. This is the problem. And I'm very hope when the fight stop, the war stop. This is a good point to start something new. I don't know to the relationship, but feel quiet, feel good, and lives very close with each other. I feel it. I hope we have a good points to start it.
But I think it needs to begin by bringing back the hostages.
Yes, of course.
The dead for burial, the ones who are still alive for rehabilitation. This war began with 243 hostages. We are currently standing on 101, and it's just unbelievable number. And I do really feel that none of the sides, neither one of, both ends of both countries or both leaderships do not wish this to end for some reason.
And from a wider point of view, I ask that question myself, but at the same time, I think it's important to remember that it's not the question of Israel against Hamas. It never has been only Israel and Hamas. It's always been wider and darker forces that are, even America has stated as their enemies 20-some years ago and, sought action, military action against these enemies. So, though the question is a natural moral question, I think that in the way that reality is, the answer to it cannot be a yes or no. The answer to it would be a question that perhaps my kids will be able to answer if we don't F this up this time. And I hope we don't F this up this time.
I just want to thank you so much and very meaningful. And I just want to say my husband, who couldn't be here tonight, just began a Harvard faculty for Israel, which is, he's a professor at Harvard with another professor, in order to promote relations between academics in Israel and in the United States, specifically at Harvard, where he's a professor. And the biggest obstacle right now is also the students in all these universities. And we went to the Harvard graduation last spring, and I felt like I was my mother in 1933. Unfortunately, she was a Holocaust survivor in the universities there. So my question to you is, what do you suggest we do for the horrendous attitudes and problems in the colleges? And this is what my husband's doing. He's trying to do it very proactively to non-political, but are there people like you willing to go and talk at the Hillels, at Harvard and Brown and Columbia and NYU, blah, 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 and I just would like to hear suggestions, because we're working on this, and we could use those suggestions.
So if I may, on our last visit here, the title of our visit was Building the Community's Resilience. And the rationale was, if Kibbutz Magen, who has gone through such a disaster and was able to bounce back and rebuild the community's resilience, American Jewish communities are facing pretty much the same adversary, perhaps in a different cloak, but it's the same issues and it's the same problems that you're dealing with as we're dealing with in Israel, right? The questions of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism. And at the end of the day, what will set how well you respond to these external threats or these external circumstances is completely dependent on how you are eternally resilient and strong. And a shattered community is not a resilient community. And then just like, a willow, every breeze of air will have it swaying this way or that way. but a strong and a resilient community that doesn't pick at old wounds and doesn't try to see what doesn't work with our brothers and sisters, but what actually makes us stronger, would be able to allow you to find the specific way to respond to the specific risks and threats that you have here. I don't think that as Israelis, I don't think we have the audacity to come and tell you how you should handle these things here, because we don't live here and we don't understand that. I wish I could have said that years ago about how our American family treated Israel and, oh, you should do this and you should do that, without knowing. Think again that if you look at Kibbutz Magen and the 32 communities in the Gaza envelope and see how they found their resilience through disaster, this is exactly what you should be doing. We will be there to support you. We're going to show up in the universities and in the campuses and the organizations that you tell us we need your help here. But if you're not going to do it, we can't help you.
Well, we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to know how we could incorporate this kind of thing.
Let's take this offline and see what we can do better. We're here to start a conversation.
We're going to take, just being mindful, they arrived yesterday, and so to be respectful of their time as well and going back into Boston to sleep, we're going to take one final question. There was one hand over there, and then we will wrap things up.
Thank you very much. My question is kind of addressed, but have you, I know you just got here, but have you been invited to speak to any non-Jewish audiences?
The question is yes. So on our first trip here, which was in June, we had an appearance in an Orthodox community in Malden. I have a distant relative who's a Malden resident and a Jewish activist and a Jewish educator. And at the same time in Malden, some city councilors were attempting to pass a ceasefire resolution. As I have been told, these are steps that have been showing up like mushrooms after the rain here, which is very interesting how you take local administration and use it to influence central politics, but that's, that's a democratic process, I guess. 3 or 4 city councilors, non-Jewish city councilors, came to that lecture. For the first time, they bore witness and they heard from first account. And the following day, we were called by the mayor of Malden and asked to meet him and discuss the resolution and the verbatim of the resolution, and we had the opportunity to explain to him what we see as offensive or disinformation that goes out through the resolution. Tomorrow, Gilad is meeting Senator John Velas, and we are having these smaller engagements, again, because we were the ones who have engaged the community in Boston. We're kind of operating here with what we recognize. We don't know what you need. And if you feel that this is a need that you have where Kibbutz Magen or Israelis in general surviving October 7th could meet non-Jews and perhaps help you here, let us know.
You ask what we are need. I don't know what we are need, but I know our mission now is to do the kibbutz bigger, stronger, and more beautiful, because this is the border of Israel. And this is now, and the years, this is our mission now.
So I want to first of all just say thank you again to our guests. I think for us, this was our first opportunity to be together, and the hope is that this is not the last opportunity to be together. And I think, if anything, we should be thinking about how can we deepen this connection, this relationship, this friendship, so that we can be there to support one another, because it is so interesting to see the ways in which both our communities are hurting from different scales of incidences, but with that need for the support and the resilience and the hope. And just the final thought, at the beginning of the video that we saw, at the end it said, Am Yisrael Chai, which is the people of Israel live. And we don't often think enough, I think, about peoplehood and what it means to be part of the Jewish people, about this connected group around the world with Israel, with American Jewry, with global Jewry. And I think this is a moment where we're called upon to deepen our peoplehood connections and to do what we can to help one another, because only together will we have the resilience to see and hope for a better future. So thank you for coming to be with us tonight in Boston. We will, I hope, many of us take you up on that offer and in due course come and visit, and hope we will find many ways that we can work together in the future for a better future for everyone. And if you want to find out more about the kibbutz and remain on their list, there's always a QR code. So please do scan the QR code. You can then be on their mailing lists to hear more about what's happening. And thank you again for being with us this evening.